Hello and welcome to another Hand Drink Solo Wine Info video, and today we are talking about the Boplaas Ring of Rocks 2018 Red Blend, which of course is made up of 50% noble varieties Cabernet Sauvignon and Shiraz and 50% Portuguese varieties, namely some old vine Tinta Barocca, some Souzao and some Touriga Franca. Now, long-standing members of the Hand Drink Solo Wine community will be very familiar with the Calitzdorp posse, mostly because we feature them semi-regularly, because the Calitzdorp is a very exciting part of South Africa, producing some really incredible wines in some fairly unique little microclimates. Historically, producers like Boplaas and De Krans and Peter Bailey have produced some of South Africa's best port-style fortified wines. But as the wine market seemed to shift away from drinks like port, they were forced to dabble and experiment with making table wines. Incidentally, the same thing was happening further north up in the Douro in Portugal. Thankfully, both in the Douro and in Calitzdorp, producers realized that the traditional port-style cultivars like Touriga Nacional, Touriga Franca, Souzao, Tinta Barocca all have enough color and aroma and structure to make some really incredible dry red blends. And what is the relevance of the Douro Valley when we're talking about Calitzdorp? Well, as you know, Calitzdorp is about 4.5 hours northeast of Cape Town, and it is fairly far inland in the Calitzdorp wine region, which means it's got a continental climate with lots of clay soils and a decent amount of altitude and low rainfall and very high diurnal range. Like which other region we know? The Douro in Portugal. In fact, that is part of the reason why the Calitzdorp posse have focused so much on Portuguese cultivars, because there are so many climatic parallels. Calitzdorp also happens to be situated along the Gamka River, not unlike the Douro Valley, which has the Douro River down the center of it. But what of this particular blend, the Ring of Rocks 2018? Well, the name Ring of Rocks comes from these ancient rock structures, not unlike the Nabta Playa in the Sahara Desert, which is really an arrangement of rocks that were put there by ancient civilizations in order to match up to certain celestial bodies or arrangements, which then acted as a sort of celestial alarm clock to remind farmers that when these stars line up with these rocks, it's time to prepare the soil and eventually plant crops for the next year. And so it was in a burst of creativity that the team at Boplaas arranged their own ring of rocks to match up with certain stars and celestial arrangements as they appear in the Calitzdorp sky. Now, the wine, as I mentioned earlier, is 50% French varietals, Cabernet Sauvignon and Shiraz. And then it is 50% Portuguese cultivars, which is led by some old vine Tinta Barocca, about 39%. There's also 10% Touriga Franca and 1% of Souzao. Now, given that there is this 50-50 French-Portuguese split, wine lovers may feel inclined to debate over which half is really bringing the true awesomeness to the blend. Is it France or is it Portugal? There is a third theory that says actually the awesomeness comes from the way that winemaker Margot Nell weaves all the components together into an exceptionally coherent whole. And in that sense, I guess it's kind of like Captain Marvel, because you keep asking, what makes Carol Danvers so awesome? Is it her Cree blood infusion that gives her strength, or is it her indomitable human spirit? Indomitable. That in fact makes her such a compelling character. Of course, in the end, it turns out that all her awesomeness really comes from the Tesseract. But perhaps Margot Nell is a winemaking Tesseract. When we taste this guy, I guess we don't really have any sort of reference of what it should taste like, because it's very seldom that these cultivars are blended. And I imagine that must be quite freeing, not having any preconceptions. So when we give it a sniff, this guy is a little shy at first, but with some time in the glass, there are 3 distinct aroma sets. The fruit set shows mostly black cherry, some black currant, and even some classic Shiraz blackberry notes. The herbal component is quite interesting. There's a little bit of kind of dried oregano, maybe some herbal tea, and then a slightly leafier vibe that you would associate with a Cabernet Sauvignon. And finally, there are some elements of oak on the nose, perhaps a tiny hint of coffee and cocoa dust. And when we take a sip, it's pretty badass on the palate. There is that lovely black currant and blackberry fruit, which mingles with quite an intense licorice element. But it's really the structure that is most impressive. It's very savory, dry in style, with some big brawny tannins. And you might say, Han, what? Savory, brawny tannins? That sounds harsh. I mean, after all, everyone needs a bosom for a pillow. To which I'd say, fair deuce. But As it evolves on your palate, up pops this softer, quite juicy black cherry element that adds just a little plushness where perhaps you thought they were going to be all angles. Also, this will cellar for a decade at least. And if you're going to drink it now, it will stand up beautifully to a smorgasbord of grilled meats. Okay, so that's all we have time for today. But if you're watching this on the Hand Drink Solo YouTube, why not subscribe to the channel so that you can get notified about the roughly 6 videos that I publish every single month, where I cover topics like wine science, viticulture, unusual cultivars, rising winemaking stars, and some off-the-beaten-path wine regions that are producing really interesting bottles within the dynamic South African winelands.